All right. Hello, everybody. Just going to try something a little bit different today. I've got the honor and pleasure of Nelson Noah joining us today.
Hey everyone.
Yeah. So pretty excited about this. If you're not familiar with Noah's work, I've got his Instagram pulled up here. He's a very talented 3D artist specializing in Houdini. And pretty soon he'll have some new tutorials coming out, right, on CG shortcuts.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun one and easy to follow, hopefully. And I can't wait for all of you to watch it. It'll be a fun
Well,
one.
I'm excited. Yeah. Easy to follow is exactly the kind of Houdini tutorial I need. So I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess a little backstory here. Noah and I had been talking about some lighting scenarios, and we were kind of having this discussion about ways of setting up lighting in a scene. And Noah, you had contacted me about, had some questions about a post that I had made on Instagram a little while ago.
Yeah, and Zach has this beautiful post called A Mathematician, and to me, it looks super complex, and I think the lighting is spot on. So I'm really curious to see how you made it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I thought, so I can pull that up here. I have this render here, and this is the render. So I think I thought this was kind of a good idea to maybe bring into a recorded session, because this is kind of a nice counterpart to the last lighting tutorial I did with Vincent Schwenk, where I used a ton of different lights in the scene to really bring out every little detail of the product that Vincent had modeled up. So we're really trying to highlight like all of the surface details and everything. And so we were using like kind of the backdrop of setting up a real photo shoot in real life and mimicking that. But I thought this was kind of interesting to showcase what the lighting is here, because really this is, and I can go through the lighting setup here in cinema, but this is really just one main light source, just one spotlight from above. So I can play this really quickly here and kind of talk this through. So the idea here is that this sort of blobby creature is like a prize specimen in some sort of collector's basement. That was sort of the idea here. So the idea is that maybe this thing is sitting just underneath one spotlight. But what's happening here is the glass on the sides is allowing a lot of reflection, and I've got caustics turned on here. So a lot of the heavy lifting is being done with the caustics and the reflections kind of bouncing around the scene, and the caustics kind of lighting up the walls and the carpet underneath. And you kind of see the caustic rings from these little like glass discs on this blobby body. But yeah, happy to hop into cinema and kind of show the kind of the lighting breakdown here, and we can talk about some of the decisions that were made.
Such an amazing and beautiful shot. Really, really great work.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to fix our thing real quick here. Our layout. There we go.
Yeah, Zach on layout production today.
Yeah. Trying this out. Hopefully this works okay. Yeah. So you can kind of see here, this is the main camera view up here, but if I kind of zoom out, you can see that it's a pretty simple scene. So I've got this sort of H-shaped glass container this blobby guy is sitting in, with a single spotlight up above. And let's just hide everything here. So I've got the spotlight up above, and I've got a dome light in the scene that's set pretty low. The exposure is set pretty low. So really, we're just getting kind of some reflections with that. And I can set up a render here to show these one at a time. But the spotlight up above, the dome light for reflections, and I have an area light pointing up just to give it a little bit more fill. The carpet down below does provide some sort of bounce, but I wanted to kind of augment that, but it's doing very little. So I can switch my view here over to a Redshift view and do a couple quick renders. Let's see. So if I just take off the area light and the spotlight, the dome light only, just do a quick little render. So you can kind of see that this is giving us some reflections and just a little bit of fill light in the scene. So you can kind of just see the blob a little bit. And mostly the reflections in all of the like chrome and glass materials.
I guess you could say you could almost get away without even using that dome light, but maybe it's adding just like a little bit of body, just ever so slightly, to kind of help bring everything together, right? Kind of like a blend of light, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And because there's so much like glossy materials in the scene, like this chrome and the glass, I can do a quick render without that. You can see it just sort of like these things kind of become a little more dead. So it does kind of add in the little subtle details in the reflections that I think help a lot in cases like this. There's lots of shiny materials, but it does very little to directly light the scene. The area light underneath is also, you can see how subtle this is. This is just providing a little bit of uplight.
Yeah.
To mimic sort of the light reflecting up off of the floor. And if I turn on the spotlight, you can see this top-down lighting with a little bit of volumetric lighting added as well. I've got a redshift environment in the scene. But if I turn off the area light and the dome light, we can kind of see the difference here, how these become a little bit less detailed.
Absolutely, yeah. Big difference, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just like little subtle things. The area light here is, I don't know if it's really necessary. It does a little bit. You can see here, just kind of getting some light underneath. But right now, the caustics aren't being calculated. So you kind of see, if I go out of my view here and go to this sort of perspective view, I can kind of show how much the caustics in this situation are adding to the scene. This is where like all of this is just sort of falling into darkness, and we kind of get that very CG look, like the old 90s CG kind of look. So, which is, it's so strange how different this is. So if I put on this will take a little second to render, but if I'm do a bucket render in order to enable the caustics, you can see the difference. So just let this render real quick. Maybe we'll just fast forward.
We'll do a fast forward on this side section.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got the caustic settings cranked on this. So
I think it would be helpful for people is to just show them some of the settings, and so that they could as they see this, kind of follow along and quickly try it on their own.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I'll kind of like walk through that and like how I've got this set up.
Yeah, like the redshift tags and things like that, like we did last time.
Yeah.
It's a heavy scene.
Yeah. Well, I've got the one graphics card turned off too. So I think I'm being dumb here and I'm rendering out a full 1080 instead of the windowed version of this. So it's like a full. So just let this go for a second. I also don't know if, here, wait a second. I'm going to stop this.
No worries. I'm doing some flip books on my own end.
Okay.
Oh man, it's so cool.
Did Cinema die?
He crashed it. She dead.
It might have. Oh, it woke up. Okay. I'm going to stop this run. I'm going to redo this real quick because this is an older scene. I want to go back in and turn on aces here. So I need to set the render and color space to aces CG and change untone map to aces SDR video. And I'm also going to make this a little bit smaller for, whoops, for this render. Okay. Try that again.
You know what? I need some music in the background. Some light on my ears only. Let's try. Next time we do this recording, I'm going to just have a beer nearby.
Yeah. It's only 11 here.
Yeah, well, it's never too late to have a beer. I'm actually more of a wine person. I don't remember.
Are you?
Yeah, I remember the last time I had a beer. It felt like the most colloquial thing to say. I'm such a nerd. Just thinking to myself, I don't really drink beer. I drink wine. But
I used to love it, man. But I had to stop. I just stopped drinking completely. I'd get so sick from just like a couple drinks. I'd be like down for days.
Really? Oh my gosh.
It's horrible.
I'm a lightweight myself, so I'll have like a glass or two, and I'm the most interesting person in the room. Let's just leave it at that. But I hear you.
Yeah, it's like slow
man.
going.
Let me show you the flipbook. So I made some edits since we last spoke on the actual animation. Look at this.
Well, I don't know if I can. I can't. I don't think I can switch over.
Oh, oops.
Right now.
Because everything's set up. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, it's all right.
When you're ready, you can just continue sharing your screen, and we're back to where we were. I imagine that you're.
Am I not sharing now? Oh no, I'm not. Let me see. Let me go back to share. There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
I think one thing that I really like about John's streams is that they have this sort of relaxed tone to them. So one thing we can try is just to have a sense of fun as we go and talk, and just make it more of a friendly back and forth conversation, and it keeps them more engaged. So let's give that a try. So as you speak, I'll try to say some things here and there, and it will kind of make it flow a bit.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So let's try it. So let me know when you're ready, and we'll begin.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so just to finish up the kind of what I was saying before though. Yeah, so big difference here between no caustics and caustics in this scene, because now we have all the reflections happening and all these caustic reflections bouncing around on the floor and lighting up this carpet and bouncing up onto the wall.
Zoom in a little bit so that it's
easier. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think so. Do you know the shortcut to do that? If I just
in Houdini, it's just
click.
Command G. Yeah, click, maybe middle mouse button. I don't know. Let's see.
This is still. Let me see if I can.
In
zoom
today's
in.
tutorial,
Actually,
we'll learn how to zoom in into a picture.
I'm so terrible at, so like I like move things around in this. You know what? Let me just send it over to the picture viewer and save myself the embarrassment. So I can kind of.
There we go. So sorry for the
right.
technical difficulties.
Yeah, just I needed someone to make me a tutorial on navigating the Redshift render view. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. So like stuff like this and
Gorgeous,
all of the reflections on the walls and the little details on this blobby guy. Yeah, so big difference between that and the caustics off.
You had mentioned
so that's doing a lot of work.
Something about using caustics for not just glass but also metals. Like if you have a scene and you have metals, just to throw in some caustics, and it could make a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people think caustics with glass, but we still get the sort of reflective caustics on things like chrome or like any sort of like shiny metal, like car rims, for instance, or something like that. Adding caustics to those materials can really, I think, improve the scene, especially when dealing with scenes with like lots of flat planes, like just like even tones of things. I think like generally it's kind of nice to break up the lighting or the way these like flat planes are being rendered. And adding like those caustics helps that.
Would you say you're using a lot of like bump textures on the materials to help kind of break up the light and bounce it around more? Because your scene has this almost like fuzzy, not fuzzy, but glossy texture. Like you just want to touch it, and you would imagine it has like a sort of roughness to it.
Yeah, so anywhere I can add the sort of surface imperfections, I will. And that's really like I could spend just days and days like adding a little bit more detail to it. And at some point I'm just like, okay, that's enough. But
That's enough.
I think I think the more that stuff happens, I think the better the CG looks. I feel like it's always that battle of like getting that perfect rendered thing to look less perfect.
Yeah.
So I do love like going into like, bump maps and just surface imperfections in the glossiness or the, reflection roughness. Anything that's like a standard value in the material, it's kind of nice to just add some variation to those.
And Zach, you've mentioned in the past that you actually take photos of your textures from your house or everyday items. You make your own textures. It's just not downloading them off the internet.
I have. I mean, I use a lot of like just standard textures, just from different, so like Grayscale Gorilla stuff and like stuff that other artists have made and downloaded. I mean, like Vincent Schwenk has a bunch of like stuff that he offers to Patreon. So there's lots of assets out there. But sometimes when you're after something very specific, it's sometimes easier to just go and grab a photo of it and use that rather than try to scour the internet for it. So I've done that as well. I know like in a previous unmentionable project we worked on in the past, we were looking for something like pretty fuzzy, and it was like, well, nothing's quite right, but I had these old slippers, so I took a photo of.
We'll get back to that project in time.
Yeah, but it worked great, like a close-up, a macro shot of a slipper. It totally works.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. But real quick, I just wanted to mention, like, so in this scene, I do have, in order to set up the caustics, I wanted all of these little things here to contribute to the scene. So what I've done is anything that I think should have caustics on them, like the glass bits in the scene. I think I have the glass under the scene here. So I've got these, the glass left, right, and bottom, and I'm using different surface imperfection textures on each of these. That's why I have them separated out and different textures on each one, just to keep the like sort of the smudges and the scratches on the glass different. So I have some like bigger swirly marks on this bottom glass, as though like this blob like scooted around on it, and less so on the sides. But each of these has a Redshift object tag on it with the cast caustic photons checked on. So that that's important. Anything in your scene that you want to start to emit caustics needs that Redshift object tag. And for the lights, I've got only my spotlight above that is contributing caustics. So it's casting caustic photons is checked. And I've got the intensity cranked up here. And and my photons, I think I have what 50 million. Is that right? Somebody can
Well,
check my zeros, but that's really the thing with caustics is there's not really any render settings to change for caustics to clean them up. Increasing your sampling doesn't do anything. The only thing that really matters is like how many photons you shoot out of your light, and that's the biggest deal.
that's yeah. I've noticed that when I've tried to play with caustics, really it's just a matter of adding more and more until it feels right, nice and clean.
Yeah.
In this case, more is more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can get away with blurring them in the settings. There's that the caustics settings where you can like change the blur radius, but it's just kind of that thing. Like if they're splotchy to begin with, you get like smoother splotchiness. It doesn't really. I don't know. I think it just comes down to adding more photons to the light. I haven't really had much luck like getting this to work out in my favor.
Just smash some photons and you're good to go.
Exactly. Just got to crank it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just dial up those numbers.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that's kind of the thing with this scene. It's really simple. And I have some depth of field and I have some in the original, I've got like some dust particles just floating around, just little bits, little splines and things. And I've got my Redshift environment settings just pretty low. It's still pretty, I would say, looking back, this might still be, it might be a little heavy-handed with the volumetric lighting on top, but I think adding a little bit of that stuff here and there, especially for a scene like this that's a little bit more like mysterious and weird, I think can add a lot to the vibe.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't touch those volumetric lights. I leave them there like that. I'm a fan of the drama of a scene, which is I think what makes it so appealing is that you have these like harsh sets of contrast and like different tones and depth. It doesn't feel CGI, but you know that it's not real, right? So you're kind of like, weird. It's a great scene.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks a lot. And I'm happy to kind of share this as an alternative to super complicated lighting setups. So I think it really depends
That's
on.
the craziest part to me. This scene looks like you have 1,000 lights like here and there, and it's just really caustics. So I think it's a unique technique to get light on your scene.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this situation does present itself to have that sort of look because of this sort of box I have. This here, let me stop this render, but in like photography, we have like bounce cards, right? So it's like, you have like one light or you're outside and you can use like a silver reflector to get some light on your subject and like opposite the sun. But that's sort of this situation here because I've got this blob in the middle of these planes of glass. So there is this sort of like bounce light and refracted light happening. In a wide open scene or something that's like more complicated, I probably would add more lights. But because it's so enclosed in this like little container, a lot of the extra lighting that makes it look complex is we're kind of getting from the caustic reflections.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah. So you had asked about like maybe using this as a reference,
right,
to work on a scene that you had in mind.
So the whole idea behind going live today was I had asked Zach to walk me through this scene, and we decided to just do it together on a call. And this is the first time that we meet for this scene. So I'm actually seeing her for the first time with you. And one of the core skill sets that I'm trying to improve as an artist is better light and material. And I think Zach is like up here in that world. So I always come to him for help. And I have a specific problem for a scene. And if it would be okay, I can share my screen, Zach. And
let's hop over.
We can begin the deadly process, the magic. So I'm going to go into my second screen here. And so I'll send Zach this beautiful reference by the talented people at Hello Playful. And I am a huge fan of this shot. So as you can see, you have some lights that break up, right? Some sort of gobo light. And you have these areas that are a bit darker and lighter. So you have that iconic, harsh contrast, right? Now, it's easy to spot good light, but it's a bit harder to actually make it. And so,
Yeah. That's beautiful. That
it,
looks amazing. I'm not familiar with this piece. I have to check this out in more detail, but that's gorgeous.
so it's a really beautiful piece. So I've gone ahead and I've created this effect in Houdini, which creates this underwater sort of life that grows over time and then shrinks back. And
Oh.
to me, the scene felt like the right area to bring this sort of logic. And you can imagine this as a 4K banner or some sort of really satisfying effect. And there's this constant sense of growth and underwater life. And so I did my version of this render in my usual style. And I'll show you that now. Finding the file right here. This is what I've created, Zach. Please don't judge it too hard. And what I've done is...
I think it looks great. I don't know. Like, that looks beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that.
It's no mathematician, but...
I think it looks really good though. I mean, you've got like, it's got good contrast. I love the colors. It's got the like really nice subtle gradient there with some different colored strands, and yeah, it looks really good.
Thank you. And so the idea here is to, kind of bring the attention to this growing thing and remove attention from the outside areas, and then add some glass and some interesting things here and there. So I think what we're going to do is just recreate the lighting setup for this from scratch. And should we get started?
Yeah. So I think, like, first of all, I want to say that, like, I think the lighting you have in there is very pretty lighting. Like, and it really, I think, still really complements the animation that you have. I don't know if you can pull up your reference, your still definitely. Image real quick. Some of the things I'm noticing here is that, so on your still here, pull it up. Can you move it over? There we go. Yeah. So I think I'm pointing at my screen so you can't see it, but I think below this sort of growth that's happening, you get really nice shadows here. So we get that nice sense of depth. Yeah. So we can see that this is really coming forward. And I think, the danger in like big, flat, soft lighting sometimes is that it can flatten the scene because we don't get the shadows. We don't have that information because there's so much light sort of filling in all those areas. But there is still a pretty good amount of shadow happening here and a good amount of contrast, even though the lighting looks pretty soft and pretty like big. So that's doing a good job, I think, of informing us that these things are coming out. Like they're sort of growing larger than the other little tendrils around this main section. So I think, like, if I'm hearing you right, you kind of were thinking that maybe this lacked like a central focus or drama, that you wanted to sort of focus like the attention of the viewer a little bit more and have less of the whole scene lit. Is that right? Definitely.
So in my mind, I almost see it as these pieces here becoming synonymous to this thing here, where it, and I could probably do more effect work. Like I could probably gather some grains or something that is near the growth area. And that would be an interesting thing to play with in Houdini as well. But sort of bring all of our colors and attention and drama and saturation to the growth factor, and everything outside of the growth factor to be sort of surrounded by light, right? There's potential for growth, but there isn't any growth. And just sort of guide the attention. So I think that would be a nice start.
And do you want to replicate that sort of underwater vibe to make this seem like it's like underwater?
Yeah, I think that would be excellent. Like getting that sort of underwater undulating sort of, so hard to describe, but this scene definitely feels like it's being driven by water sim. And actually, before we go further, for those that are interested in recreating the setup, what's happening is really quickly, it's actually fairly simple, is we have a map that is creating a gradient along the length of our grid here. And as you can see, it draws. I'm not sure why it's being slow. Just hide other objects. The scene is being unusually slow when it shouldn't be at this point. Sometimes Houdini will read attributes or cook things that it doesn't need to. So what you do is you come to reset viewport, and that usually does the trick for me. Fingers crossed. There we go. So now it's cooking accordingly. Maybe it's the spreadsheet that's, it's whenever I view the spreadsheet, it messes something
up. Wow. Is that, do you have like stuff that's updating in the spreadsheet that it has to display, and that's what's like slowing it down?
I really shouldn't, but that's what it felt like. But
it's interesting.
It's some weird bug. So let's go back to the thing here. And for some reason, we're viewing the HDRI. Let's hide that. There we go. And let's go back. All right. So we have a simple attribute transfer here that's giving us the color. It is usually slow. Really weird. But there we go. No, this is the proper speed. So there's a bug with my spreadsheet there. And then what we do next is that we sort of just bring that data into a solver. And inside the solver, we write a little bit of text, and we say that we want the hairs to grow only when they are presented with the data of the incoming growth, right? So this is saying grow wherever you are. And you'll notice you get this sort of like radial pattern and swirl. And that's happening because we have a smoke simulation that's advecting the hair particles over time. So you get a really nice and undulating movement. That's pretty much...
That's very cool. That's awesome.
Thank you. And that's pretty much the basic setup. And then we basically break up everything based on probability. So we have the smallest hair, the largest hairs, and sort of bringing them out into different categories so that you end up with different sort of treatments to each hair. And so you get a different sort of setup. So you have more contrast of geometry and shape, which helps build the scene. And so that's pretty much it. And now we can just begin the actual lighting part. So I'm going to go back to my Redshift view here and visualize only my hairs, hide my lights for now. These are my old lights, so we'll just hide these for now. I'm going to visualize the top camera. And let's move our camera a bit, right, to about here. And I will turn off all my lights and make sure that all of my shapes have just a basic plastic material, so that's all we're working with. And let's send that to the render queue and see what happens.
Okay, so no lights. We're in pitch blackness.
Exactly. So now,
all right.
I guess what we could do, Zach, is do your same trick with the HDRI, like a really subtle bit of light that's coming from everywhere, so just so that we can see something. It could be a nice start.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, we could do that. Just like a general. So I'm trying to think. If you have like in situations like this, like where you want just like a real like kind of like a fill light. If you have like a overcast day, like an exterior overcast day, that could be a good way to just sort of bring in an HDRI where you just want like sort of an overall fill without a lot of direction.
I don't think I have a light like that. Or do you mean like something more standard?
Oh, it just depends. So, I mean, it just depends on what you're going for. So, I think if we were going to like build up, if we are going to look at the reference, like that, what's it, Playful, Hello Playful did that sort of scene where it looks like it looks like it's underwater. So maybe there's this sort of like environment that's a little bit cloudy, like the water is sort of like scattering light in all directions. So maybe we would want like some sort of HDRI that doesn't have like maybe like one tiny little light in it, or like one window and then the rest is dark. I'm trying to say less contrasty HDR. But I think anything, I mean, we could make it work. If you have a go-to, I can kind of show what I'm talking about as we like kind of rotate it around.
So let's make it, let's just go back to default settings. Let's say exposure of 1, intensity of 1. So this is what we see now. And then we have a grid that has a black background to help kind of like a slightly darker background to help bounce light a bit. And so here's a HDRI. And we also have another camera, side view camera. So it helps us kind of see exactly what's happening. We can visualize that right there.
Okay. So it looks like we've got some like left to right sort of lighting going on with the HDR.
Let's turn off the DOF. There we go. Yeah. All right.
And maybe for right now, like maybe if that background plane has a really black texture on it, what if we turn on clay render mode in the Redshift render view?
There we go.
Yeah, so we can kind of see the shadows on the ground that these little tendrils are casting. So it looks like the light's coming from sort of kind of behind camera left, and it's sort of towards our the back right.
So if we come here and just select the camera, we can kind of just start rotating it a bit and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a pretty contrasty HDR. But if you go over to the HDR setting where you have your texture in there, we can kind of soften this a little bit. If we take our gamma, and I always get this wrong, like if we raise the gamma here, let's like put it up and do a re-render. All right, and let's lower the gamma. Let's go to like 0.7.
There we go.
So what we're doing here is sort of messing with the gamma of the HDR, and we're sort of lowering the contrast. So when we went it up to like 1.7 or whatever it was, we could see that it was like kind of casting these really harsh shadows.
It was.
Yeah. So now we can see this is got kind of softer. And the, so this looks like the saturation's already cranked up to 200. If we go and maybe if we put that to, 500 right now, just to kind of look at the tone of this, we can kind of see where we got this kind of greenish hue.
I guess we would want something on the bluer ocean kind of vibe. This could be great.
Yeah. So we're kind of we just took whatever HDR we had and sort of we're just manipulating it until we get something close to what we want. So if you don't have this sort of overcast thing to just fill it in, we can kind of tweak settings to make it kind of fit with what we want. And for something like this, I think, lowering the intensity quite a bit.
So now we can go to a lower number, 0.5, maybe lower the exposure a bit. Something I like to do a lot. And then obviously we fill it up with other lights, but just kind of create some body, if you will.
Yeah, and we can go back and sort of tweak this. And this, depending on what our goals are, this may be, too dark or too bright, depending on how dramatic or how much contrast we want in our final scene. But I think this is a good sort of starting point. And one thing, we still do have some directionality to our dome light. And if you notice, it looks like the light is coming from the top of our render frame to the bottom. So we see the shadows on our floor here that are being
Yeah, they're coming
sort of,
like this.
yeah. So it looks like it's coming, from the top, which is, it's nice. Even though we're kind of using this as like a fill light, it still can be nice to give some shadow detail. If we rotated this so the light was completely on top, it would flatten it out quite a bit. So just, and maybe that's something you want, but maybe, it's nice to have that little extra shadow detail in there just to give the sense of depth.
I quite
Yep.
like the direction here, because even if you look at the animation here, it kind of, you get these that kind of bend. So it's a good way to kind of bring light in. It's always like sort of direction, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like one thing we could do here as like the next step is maybe try to mimic those sort of caustic ocean bottom, the effect there. And actually, so in my previous tutorials, I've talked about sort of holding up a camera phone to some shadows on the ground, or sort of making your own animated shadow maps or gobos. I actually have one that would work pretty well for you, and I'll send it over to you, Noah. And if you want to download this and give this a shot, it's basically like some fake caustics that I've done in After Effects. And it's just a quick like noise. And if someone's interested, I could do a separate little thing on how I made that in After Effects. But just some noise sort of layered on top of each other and exported out as a JPEG sequence.
So I've just set up HDR light, RS light, an area light, and I'm going to put in the map that you just sent me.
Okay.
So what we do is just we come to our light and we enable texture here, and now you don't see anything. And to make the texture visible, probably bring down the spread a bit. And then I'm going to find your file. It's in my downloads.
Yeah, and what you did there is super important. Like adding, so we can use these sort of projected gobos in spotlights, but also in area lights. But the key is to bring that spread down, so it's less like a big softbox and more like a projector. So yeah, exactly. We can.
One thing to know with Houdini is you'll notice I'll add an F4 instead of F5, and that's going to make it so that we can play sequence. Now let's make sure that we can actually see our texture. So what I'll do is I'll hide everything. I'll do like a refresh. Let's see.
So no, what is the so it's a little bit different in Cinema 4D than it is in Houdini. What is the dollar sign F5 or F4? What does that do?
All it's telling Houdini is to play a sequence of images, right? So it's going to output whatever number it has. So it'll be like 01.01, 02, 03. It's telling you the frame number that we're in. So right now, F4 would be equal to frame 25, for instance. But just trying to quickly debug here.
I think it looks like maybe there's some volume contribution on in this light. So maybe for now, it looks like there's maybe a redshift volume in the scene.
I think so. You're right. It looks like I had used maybe a volume metric light before. There we go.
And maybe, let's do the spread down right now for debugging. It's just like 0. So it's perfectly.
Here. GBF4. All right. Let's just bring down the spread a bit. And then there we go.
And I think that texture is it's like more like a 16:9, I think. That looks pretty wild, though. Is there some other stuff going on with that light?
Time to find out. Did I use the right texture? I think not. I know. Yeah, it's the wave caustic projection 01, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But there's no other like special. I don't even know what I'm about to say here. VOPs going on with some noise added or anything like that, where we're doing extra texture stuff.
No, let me just try it on another light that I had working here. So I'm using the same texture in a different light. I think there's something wrong with this light here. Let's see. We can just compare it really quickly. I'll just copy the data from here, hide this. Sometimes you get unlucky live and it's embarrassing, but let's see.
Oh no, it's not. Like all of this is completely new to me, and I'm not going to edit out all of my Houdini terminology blunders. I'm going to like leave all my calling things by the wrong names.
I have no idea why this light is broken. I mean, I know that this one's open, but that doesn't make a difference at all. Super weird.
I don't know. Can we just drop a brand new area light?
Yeah,
in the scene?
Let's do that.
See if maybe it just. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe something got weirded out.
Even this like super blue light, it shouldn't be that color. But anyway, it's.
I don't know if the default light comes in with volume contribution on now or not, but it might be the same.
Yeah, it does.
Same thing. Oh, it does. Yeah.
And
that might be it.
Let's go to texture again. Right. Let's add our texture. Let's bring down the spread. That doesn't look like your light.
Let me pull it up. Let's see what. Let's see. Maybe did I send you the wrong one?
No, you sent the right one because if you notice, here, that's right. Correct?
That sort of noise? No, I think this is right. I think it's just scaled incorrectly and maybe too bright. So I think if we maybe take this as like a 16:9, and yeah, I think that's
there we go.
That's what it is. And then it just needs to be scaled to 16:9 aspect ratio. There we go.
And let's make sure that it's animating. You notice it's not actually at least moving, or it is moving.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Perfect. So just adding that F5, not F4. That was my mistake. So anyway.
Oh, okay.
So we have the light, and now let's change the size here to be use texture. Okay, here we go. All right. So increase the width to, let's say, 16 and the height to 9. There we go.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same thing here if we wanted to like modify this at all. I know in Cinema, there's a way to sort of like add a shader graph to the textures to like modify it if you want to put like to layer it up or change, like put a ramp on it to clamp it down. But I think something like this is maybe best like really subtle. So,
well, in order to answer that question, all you have to do is come here to allowed editing of content, then double click, light shader, redshift bob, and here we are. And here we have the texture that's incoming from the outside. And for instance, if we wanted to replace this with a Maxon noise, just come here and pipe the Maxon noise directly into our color. And there we have it.
Oh, nice. Okay, so maybe on the texture sampler, we can kind of do the same thing. It might be nice to maybe change the gamma to like 1.2. Just try to like maybe get more contrast in there.
So like what we could do is pipe it into a ramp, for instance.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And then there's several ways we could change the range. But the quickest thing is here we can remove the dark spots or add more of the white. or we can multiply the max on noise with this noise. So anything that you could do, essentially do in cinema, you could achieve here in the VOP network.
Oh, it's perfect.
VOP is just like visual programming, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think what I would do in this case, just to sort of replicate more of the reference, if that's what we were going for, is maybe pull the black in just a little bit, just so it's, or maybe back to where it was. And I would just inch it over to the right just slightly, just to get rid of some of the grayer areas, because if we want more contrast in the scene, we're kind of using the HDR for our fill light. So I think we'd want like pure black, more pure blacks for this one, and maybe, less of the whites to sort of just like sprinkle through. So
we could maybe make it like this.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you can make that gray instead of lowering the intensity of the light. Yeah, and we could also use the ramp to color it as well if you wanted to use the color here, or use the color and temperature setting in the light to give it like a Kelvin.
So we can come outside, and let's call this our texture light, and we can come here to the mode and change it to temperature. I think because we're using a texture, we wouldn't be able to actually change the temperature unless we...
If you go back, hey Noah, if you go back, there's a setting to do color and temperature in there, temperature and color. And now it'll keep that texture, and we can, if you change that to... there you
I didn't know you could do that. You learn something new every day. Look at that.
Yeah.
Let's bring back our HDRI and see what that looks like. We can increase the intensity, lower it 5, or maybe like that.
And I think right now, so we can bring our tendrils back in and take a look. And this is where it's going to get to taste sort of thing. The light now is directly straight down. So the light is coming directly from our camera. But we have our HDRI coming where the light is sort of coming from the top. So it might be kind of nice to angle this so that we're sort of more in line with our overall lighting. So our light would maybe be more up top and angled towards the center of our frame.
So more up top, a bit of an angle. We can kind of see it hit some of these areas. Maybe we could rotate the light a bit, get here in the UV map space, so that we hit exactly what we want.
Yeah. We might be able to scale that light down too to get
more repetition.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing though, because you're scaling now the UV, right, of the texture?
Yeah, we're just messing the UV space, but the alternative is to just shrink the light as well. And it's probably not the best practice to do it like this, frankly, but it's just an easy and hackable way if you really want really precise control.
Yeah. I've not really messed with that because I usually just sort of scale the light, but that's interesting to do it that way. I'm going to have to play with that because I don't know what happens with the tiling. I don't think this is a seamless tiled, so you might see the...
Definitely, you'll see some...
You will see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wish it weren't seamless. Then you would have to make a seamless texture. But here we have more, and we can shrink it even further. To me, that this is already looking quite cool. We'll probably need some more lights in order to really enjoy what's happening here.
Yeah, and I think and this is where dialing up and down the exposure of the HDR and this, along with our sort of hero spotlight, because we want to sort of mimic. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, with the HDR.
Very nice, yeah. Some nice highlights. We just want to make sure that we have some light now to actually capture our tendrils.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways to do this. We can either do the spotlight, was in my example scene, or we can do another area light with a very small, make it sort of like a spotlight. So a small radius and then like a very low spread. So we can sort of replicate the spotlight effect.
Let's try
And
those.
it's really interesting because I tend to, so here's the thing with the spotlight, it's good because we have control over, like, we can change the shadow softness and, change like where it's in the scene, and it gives us a lot of control. However, one thing I'm not happy about with the spotlight is that we can't really control the size of the reflection. So it is just it's in the scene as though it's like a very small point, just like the tiniest little dot of a light. And lights in the real world aren't really like that. Like if we think about like a Fresnel light, they're like, they can be huge. They can be like this big. And so that's where I kind of go with like the area light usually, because I can control like how big the disc is and then control the spread. Because if we want big reflections, we would want, a bigger source of the light.
So let's try that. So I've got a spot here, and I will turn off everything. It is. So the only thing that we're seeing now is a spotlight. And let's try to reduce the spread. So it's looking at this area. Yeah. I wonder where all the blue light is coming from. Probably
I think it's your your volume.
So what we can do is come here to out, ROP. ROP. Come to Redshift, volume, disable. There we go. And yeah, much more predictable now. So we've established that the light is coming from this side already with the H0I. So we'll probably want to invert it, bring it back, bring it up, and blend. It's gonna just like get it in there. Nice.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good point you bring up here, because a lot of times there's sort of this sense of like, oh, hey, we'll use 3-point lighting, right? And we've got light coming from one side, so we'll do the opposite. We'll go on the other side.
Right.
Which can be great. But what you're doing, though, is reducing contrast in your scene. And sometimes that's wanted. But if you want a high contrast scene, you'd kind of want to leave those shadows alone. So if we probably, in this case, if we want the drama and the high contrast, we probably would want our lights all sort of coming from relatively the same direction to preserve the darkness of the shadows.
Right. So we know that HRI is coming from here. So I've gone ahead and I've added our area spot towards the same direction. So we're getting like these streaks, right?
Yeah.
I've decreased the exposure a bit to kind of soften the lights a bit.
And what's our spread at on this light? So it's like 0.27?
So the spread is...
Is that what it is?
Our spread right now is 0.13. And if we go even smaller, it's going to reduce that radius. So we're bringing more attention to that specific area. One thing we could even try is maybe make it a disc, right? Instead of a rectangle.
Yeah. Depending on, so if you wanted that sort of spotlight look, like a round spot, the disc with a small spread will show that the shape of the whatever shape your area light is. So yeah. So and then that's one way to do it. Or if you wanted and that's what I use a lot too, is like for like beams of light, like shafts of light, we could do like a long elongated area light with a low spread, and you get that like a sharp beam, like a rectangle.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is
this is quite nice here. We're kind of highlighting where the light they're coming up, the little beams.
Yeah.
This would be a good time to check our regular render. Because if you notice, we're not getting some of the blue because of the material on the floor. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. BG. So yeah, I just got a plastic as my floor. If we set it to like a darker gray, we'll get more of that. reflection. So I'm happy with this for now, and we can always come back and edit it.
Yeah. Yeah. So even like right here, that is definitely a more dramatic
Definitely.
scene. Yeah. So we've got like much less like ambient light in the scene.
Oof, look at that with our texture now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of, I wonder if we were going to go for the underwater scene, I wonder if all the lights should be like the same color temperature. Do you think that, or I guess it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe this is a good time to frame our camera better so that we get more of like the entire strip, right? Right now we have a really small camera to make things load really quickly. So since we're trying to kind of manipulate where the texture is hitting and breaking our image, right? We need to figure out the exact frame that we want. So I imagine let's make like a sort of like something that would feel like a 4K, but with small numbers. So maybe like let's do 1000 over 2000. Sorry, other way around. 2000 over, let's say, like 800. We've got like a bit of a strip, maybe 720. And this will give us more room. There we go. That feels
nice.
A little bit better. And we also get the cheapness of it being so small in resolution that it's going to render quickly during our chat. Look at that. So now what I like to do is kind of focus our texture, right? So
you mean the texture of the area light?
Exactly. So
that caustic one? Okay.
It breaks up our scene even more. So already this is looking really beautiful, I think. So let's hide the area spot. HRI is really nice, actually. It almost makes me not want to use the area light in a way. It's interesting.
Yeah, so maybe it's not needed.
And I think actually the beauty that we're getting is from this texture. So we need to make this texture more pronounced, more obvious, right? So let's hyper focus on that one together. So maybe if we bring up the intensity, right? Doesn't seem to be doing very much yet. It's doing something. Exposure 0.
Yeah, and I think before when we were sort of judging this, we were kind of looking at it just on the flat grid. And I think it was easy to see, but now with all the tendrils like that, I think it's getting kind of broken up even more.
I think the problem was that I was visualizing an old light. So let me delete that. And let's try again. Sorry about that. Okay, so HRI is hidden. Texture light is on an area spot. There we go. So we're back. So let's bring this down to like 50. There we go. Look at that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This is more of the expected behavior. I think this is really beautiful. It creates a sort of like L, S shape. You know, it's like, it's really nice.
Yeah, and that's going to move. I think the overall motion of that is sort of like left to right. But I don't know which way the light is headed. But there does, I think the animated texture does have sort of like a flow to it from one side to the other.
So the texture is animated. So if we hit play here, we should be able to see more or less what's going to happen. It's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of see as I move it, you get more different sides, which is really nice. Yeah, it adds sort of a breakup. So I guess what I want to do now is kind of make sure that we're getting, there we go, like that, more of like a central focus, get more of the interesting areas. And maybe if we go back into the shader here, this would be a good time to maybe add more of the white. A bit stronger.
Make it brighter. Yeah.
Maybe this will kind of help us see what's actually happening. But this is the essence of the texture. Right? Bring it in just a little bit. There you go. I like that personally. I think it's good. Go back to our object level and maybe bring down the intensity back to like 8, exposure minus 0.3. I'm just literally smashing numbers that I like until it starts to feel a bit better. Maybe bring back your spot. And if you notice, the spot has a really white light. So like you were saying before, this might be a good point to choose a common temperature so that everything feels cohesive.
Yeah, I think so. I think if the goal is like an underwater thing, I think we'd kind of have that sense, and maybe the breakup then would be maybe the color texture of the tendrils could break it up, but the light would be unified. Yeah.
So what we could do is copy the parameter of our temperature here, and come here to instead of color, use temperature and color. Well, in this case, it would just be temperature, and say paste relative reference. Now, whenever we edit the texture here, it's also going to update the area spot. So we don't have to like constantly change back and forth.
That's
so
nice.
We could go for a warmer, or what we could do is we could actually negate it so that when the other one goes warmer, the other one goes darker.
Oh, that's interesting. You just did a -1 to flip it?
Exactly.
Oh,
so
wow.
I do it. I negated the value here. So this one will give you the opposite, right? So if this is cold, this is warm, right? And you could maybe do other things. Like, let's say right now you want to make this only 50% of red, blue, right? So the area light is 50% less blue than the other blue. And I do this all the time, and I think it does add something. So I actually quite like how the area light here is bringing some light, but it's also bringing a less blue color, more of a pale blue. So it breaks up the scene even more. You have more contrast, and that's how real life is. So maybe like a 72%. That's creates a bit of a blend, and then we can increase the spread a bit. We increase the intensity here. We can better see what's happening. I think 5 is great, and we can bring back the HDRI. And with our light here, we also have some saturation and things going on. I wonder if we could set this to just be temperature as well. Probably
for
not.
The HDR.
Yeah, instead of color, temperature.
I don't think so, because it's using the color information from the texture, and I don't know if there's a way to blend between the two. Maybe there is. I don't know though. I don't know if I've tried that with the HDRs.
Maybe there's a way with Vex, but I don't think it's a call for that. So I like how this feels, right? And it's quite interesting, but everything is too blue, right? We need to now kind of bring in some reds, maybe purple and magenta and some yellow here and there. Like you're saying, we can bring that here. But I would say that maybe even with the lighting from our caustics here, we could do a better job at kind of like highlighting more of a contrast, perhaps. Let's try that. So here, so let's make the color difference more dramatic, right? Right? And then here, maybe let's go on the more on the purple side. I'll hide the HDRI now in the area. Let's kind of focus on this light here. Maybe we go back inside, and I'm just fiddling with settings right now. Kind of get us a bit closer. This is interesting already, I feel. Kind of like bring in more of that light, get a bit stronger. See, it's like, to me, it feels really strong in the areas where it highlights, right? So I'm trying to get closer to that sort of feeling, and you tell me what you think.
I think so. In this case, I would, maybe go with a like a little bit more saturated color in the ramp. and it will probably darken up quite a bit. But that's okay, because I think if we keep the color there and then crank the intensity, we'll get that sort of look. So in this gradient here, like on that purple, let's try something that's like a little more saturated and a little less value. So it'd be, yeah, go, I'd say a little bit more. There we go. And now let's try to go back to the light settings and take the, like, yeah, right. So now when this sort of like blows out, like the light gets more intense, we're going to like start to shift the light parts towards white, but then the fall off is going to be more saturated.
Yeah, this feels nice. And so what we could do now is kind of like move our texture again a bit. So it just feels perfect. Oof, look at that. Like I like that a lot. The way that it's highlighting, maybe we could make it even smaller again. Okay, nice. We can.
I think the nice thing about this too is because we've got the spread so low, it's like 0. We're getting those hard shadows.
We are,
and I think that's pretty nice here. Like, I
like this.
I feel like that adds a lot of contrast. Yeah, I think that looks good.
And here we have the HRI, which is adding some body, the area, right? Just let's set this to maybe like 0.5 again. Maybe we don't need to do this since we're actually changing the color.
Oh, right. Now that we've introduced the color along with temperature, we're sort of mixing it for our projection. So it's going to be a little bit different anyway.
Might not be the thing to do now. Maybe now we want to go for an actual color that matches more of that blue. So what we could do is actually come here and figure out what that color is right here. And we could say copy parameter and just do it here. Say paste relative reference, right? And we could say color and temperature, right? And then we can also copy the temperature and we should be able to match it.
Oh, yeah. I see. Yeah, it makes sense.
And now we can do our old trick of adding a little bit of disparities. There we go. That makes it slightly different. We can also try negating it again, see what happens. Not what we want, but we get the idea. So now we have a bit of a breakup in the scene with everything. But now the dark areas are really dark. So maybe just finding a nice balance.
And you're in the texture light now?
Yeah, just moving it a bit until feels right. In general, it just produces such beautiful, interesting results. Like even here, the way it,
yeah,
I like that. And we know that our light moves a lot, so.
Yeah, and I think so. One thing I think we could try to see what this looks like is maybe at a later frame when more of these tendrils are growing, is playing with the intensity of our spotlight and really pushing it further than we think it should be, just to see what it looks like.
So that area, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Ooh, very cool. Obviously, that's very intense, but maybe something 80 could be quite interesting. Like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. I find it's always good to like see what it is, like push it like till it's terribly bright and awful, and then back it off just to see like what that does.
Before we go any further, I think it's a good point to sort of think about materials to bring into the scene as well. So we could bring back some of the materials that I had before one by one and see kind of how that feels too. So
yeah.
I already had some materials that I've created. So there's the hair. And what I'm doing with the hair is I'm getting that the curve view attribute, which is just a length on each strand of hair, so that I can kind of change the color. Maybe some spots are blue, some spots are red. So let's just add hair first. So we'll come here and we'll add our hair. So now it's going to change the materials of just the hair. And then I will also add my hair sweep 01 and my hair sweep 02. And then we'll just kind of go back and edit everything as we go. And let's see, what else can we do? Yeah, that's looking good. So if we come here to our hair, we're blending between these colors. So if we set this to maybe red, that would be, and let's say yellow. That's sort of like the color is going along the hairs. And the hair refers to everything that's fairly thin. So it's really hard to see actually. So if we go into a sweep, which are the ones with a thicker texture, we'll be able to see it a lot better. We can come here to, our colors and kind of just change things up a bit.
So this would be like a gradient from the root of these to the tip?
In this case, we're using just noise on this one. So this one doesn't care about that. So they're all a bit different.
So the noise would be just more random between those colors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this one is like gold. So let's see where we're getting gold from. Yeah. The gold is on these ones that are getting nice and shiny.
Yeah, that's nice. The reflection there is nice. It's sort of like a star field. The background's nice.
Copper, right? We're getting some like nice reflection in some of them. But what's hard to see is because our lights have so much color to them, it makes it difficult to see what my materials are actually doing. So let's just drop RS material here with a very obvious color like this. Well, this, right? And let's just drop it into the surface and make sure that we're actually affecting hair sweep 01. And we are. So notice that hair sweep 01 refers to these red ones.
I see. Yeah.
And then hair sweep 02. And then let's see what hair refers to. This one would be let's make something like nice and yellow. This is just the general, the strongest color, the kind of thing that overrides mostly everything. And that's interesting. Let's see why. So hair. So as you can see, hair in this case refers to the thinnest strands, which are everywhere. So that's why you get so much of that color. And what we could actually do is come here, because I'm running them as, and we can lower the thickness.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you're using a Redshift object to render these as like the Redshift strands?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So if we hide this now, we'll be able to see what everything else is kind of doing. So I guess what we could do is bring more of these, right? So maybe we could switch the focus. So maybe these outside ones could be sweep 01. And these inner ones could be like sweep 02. Like that. So now if we render, we kind of have less of a metallic and more of blue. So we can just kind of just dialing in, can go back, and then this is affecting these. And if we change the mask, the overall scale, we're able to get sort of a change of color based on the Fresnel. So we come here, we can maybe try different values, right? Maybe some like red. Just kind of playing with, I quite like this, right? A bit of a dramatic.
Yeah. That's nice.
And as you know, material, I'm not using any bump maps or textures at the moment. It's all just basic materials, right? And for our copper, what we could do is maybe introduce some strong sort of color, right? Maybe we could use gold. Let's refresh, see where it is. Right here, gold. It just adds a little bit of shininess. You could try one of the older materials. I think the gold was fine. Could even use like a glass or water. Right, it adds a little bit of an interesting thing. But I'm gonna go back to copper, and let's bring back our hairs, and then let's look at our reference maybe. In a way, this is starting to feel a bit more like this actually. To me,
yeah, and I think. Yeah, I think one of the differences, maybe we can try this to go back to our HDRI and increase the, like, just the general, like, ambient light of the scene. So we go back to our HDRI and just crank the exposure up a little bit.
Yeah.
And we'll get that sort of...
Let me try to maybe get to a slightly... So this color is nice and warm. I like that a bit. We could go back to our material blender actually and blend between these different colors, right? So make like a nice, maybe you can flip it. That's cool. And just kind of dialing in some colors on the fly. Yeah, I like that the best so far. All right, so now going back to HRI, right? So you're saying that what we can try is increase this or change it up a bit, or you meant the texture?
So, no, I would say the intensity. Like, put the intensity at 20.
Done.
Just let's look at it. So, okay, so obviously that's probably too strong, but it's good to know. So 20 is too much, but we can get a sense of, like, where we are there. So maybe let's try 2. Maybe 4. And we are kind of getting, like, it is very green now. So I wonder if the hue should be shifted over a little bit. So it's interesting now that if we go back to our clay render, let's just hit clay render real quick.
Yeah.
And now we can see without the, so I think the saturation, if we go back to our HDRI, the saturation used to be like 500 or something. So we were really cranking that. So let's go back to like 500 and we can just take a look. And now the hue, let's like drag that over and see where it needs to be.
There we go. We're getting closer. That feels right.
Yeah. So that looks okay. So for a clay render, so this is where it gets
we're
like
just
kind
getting
of
a lot of yellow from our hair, so we could probably modify that a bit, right? And go back to some of these blues tones. And this is and am I editing the right thing? Actually, this is what I'm meant to be editing. Yeah, that's right. So now what we could do is kind of like modify this a bit. Nice. That actually feels really cool in my opinion. I love the contrast between these thicker things and these skinnier things. We could try here is maybe there we go, like some like salmon color.
So a quick question for you, Noah, like when you render stuff like this, do you try to get the image like nailed down in Redshift, or do you bring these renders into like Photoshop or After Effects and do post work on them?
Sometimes I will do some like After Effects or some Fusion editing, but for the most part, I try to get everything done in Redshift as much as I can.
One thing to think about, I think, in that sort of workflow is because now we've sort of bumped up the exposure of this HDRI, we're getting like more ambient light in the scene and like a little bit, our shadows are less contrasty. But sometimes it might be good to do that if we are going to bring our images into post and edit them there. So if I'm doing something, I may err on the side of like less contrast in the render, knowing that I can bring the contrast back in post.
Yeah.
But if it just depends. If you want to just nail it in the render and like, I'm going to export this directly from Houdini up to Instagram. So maybe, you know, it'd be like, oh, it's not contrasty enough. But that's where it's like, you know, some of these decisions being made about lighting, it's sometimes good to think about the overall workflow and what the process is going to be.
So like when I look at this, right, like something you could do in editing is maybe fix up the contrast a bit, maybe set up some AOV so you could further separate the area where you're doing the growth versus the plane. That could be quite interesting. That would be a whole nother level of editing that could, and I accidentally click RT. I don't know if that happens to you. It's so annoying. I don't know why Redshift has this RT thing there. But it really...
Yeah.
So now as we move the camera, we get some really interesting... Like, this is beautiful, in my opinion. I love the contrast between the things around the image and these thicker things, right? It, to me, feels really underwater. Let's see.
Yeah, and maybe it's worth now, like, seeing what it looks like with some of that Redshift environment in there. Like, if that's turned on.
Yeah. So,
with the...
So, everyone watching this, the way that I make volume scattering work is through the scientific process of moving these dials. So, I just go like, okay, yeah. And obviously you won't see anything now because if you recall, we turned it off from the light. So we're going to gently, and I'm actually surprised how good this is looking. It's quite really different from any of our sort of like the other tests that I've done. It's really these areas. So if you come here and tell the HRI to add like 1, it's going to blow out the image. But if you say like 0.01, it adds a little bit of it. But if you add another 0, it adds even less, right? And you just get a little bit of that contribution. So it's the opposite of a caustic photon. The less of it you use, the better. And it just adds a little bit of breakup of the light. It adds this sense of depth, right? You'll notice here on the edges, it's a form of attenuation. I think it's the word that I'm looking for. So we'll do the same thing with the other ones. Right, and kind of just hope for the best and see if it actually adds something for us.
So real quick on the spotlight, can we try doing that at like 0.1? Just like cranking it and seeing?
Yeah.
Let's just go overboard.
Whoa.
So that's a lot. So maybe like 0.1?
Oof, I don't know. That's it. It's ready for Instagram.
That's you ready? All right.
That's so cool. I love this streak of light you're getting here. Maybe if we make the disk a little bit smaller, we could actually play with this more. Right? And maybe like 0.05. There we go. That's really interesting in my mind. It's adding like this sort of light. Of course, this blue feels too plasticky now to some degree. So maybe we can improve that a bit.
So I think one thing to try before we change the material, it might be interesting to see, because we've added some of the volume to this, is let's take a look and say, maybe take the exposure to like, instead of negative 0.5, let's do it to like 2. So what I'm looking at here and what I do kind of like is that we've sort of accentuated the bright spots on some of the lower tendrils. And let's go even crazier. Let's go 5. Let's take that up to 5. And now let's go to our volume contribution and go like 0.001.
Or do you mean 0.1 literally like this?
No, I think like even less, like,
okay.
Because we've increased the exposure, we're getting more of that volume contribution. But what's kind of nice about this is that we're getting that sort of these really strong highlights here. So these thick tendrils are
really like blowing out, right?
Yeah. But I think that could be, I don't know. That might not be a bad thing. I think it might be a good thing to kind of separate those and like with some In the example that I showed, I had a lot of the post effects on. So I've got the bloom and the streak and things. And I think that could also help in this case. I don't know if you have like the bloom and things on, but
Not yet.
getting a little bit more of those volumetric effects
So
in camera.
I've added the regular photographic exposure. Now let's add some post effects. So we'll start with bloom. And right now we're editing the top camera. And I really do love, because you have to remember, working with a really small camera that's not HD. So the minute that you do a bucket render and you make this a 4K render, these highlights are going to feel really beautiful and like bold, right? And it's actually quite hard to get this sort of look normally, right? But I think because of ACES, like it's really helping out with at least I know before in the past when I've put numbers this crazy, I just get a really white look. But obviously we're getting really nice breakup of color and slashes like you would if you look at the sun, for instance.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, with ACES on, that's where I feel like we can really push the intensity of our lights. We don't have to worry about that sort of clipping that used to happen where we need to like lower our intensity so we're like not losing that color information. But now like ACES handles that. So we can like really push a lot of light into the scene. And that helps too, like kind of with light, that indirect bounce. So we get more GI, we get more of like the bounces in the scene, and the highlights tend to like, I think, we, with the post effects too, we get the like sort of shimmer and the little like streaks of the very brightest highlights. So I think that helps. I think it helps to sell, especially a scene like this where you want that sort of atmospheric look.
Definitely. So going back to the camera, what do you think we should do with the bloom, the flare, and the streak?
So I think for the bloom, let's just try lowering the bloom threshold and just dragging that down a little bit and seeing how that affects the viewport. Although, you know what? I don't know if the post effects work in the, what do you call it? The frame, the like.
Oh, this? Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So I think if we drag that, we should be able to see it. Like if we take it to like way down.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we like just start to like pull it up a little bit, we can just sort of focus on the highlights of the tendrils.
That's working for me. And
yeah. One thing I did want to mention, so you enabled the photographic exposure setting, or you did. Oh, okay. Maybe you didn't. So I thought you did.
There we go.
But
sorry, I thought I did too.
Well,
yeah.
Personally, I never use that. I know. Here's the thing. I think if you wanted to nail it in the render and then like send this out to like just render it and then post it without going any like extra work, this is great. We get this sort of like mini photo editor built into Redshift with the exposure controls. However, I think people tend to run into an issue because if you wanted then to go into post and really kind of tweak this and have like AOVs and rebuild it, the photographic exposure, at least in cinema, will, if you render out an EXR, it will clamp your values. So the photographic exposure will basically turn your high dynamic range EXR into a JPEG in an EXR file format. So you go in, you've got this EXR and you go to like change the exposure and it looks like you're changing the exposure on a JPEG.
Yeah. So that's what we want. It will be pretty banded looking.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I tend to leave the photographic exposure off because I do a lot of work in post. But if you're going like straight out of your renderer right into like whatever you're posting it on, or, just that's calling it final. Yeah, it's totally fine.
Okay, so I'm happy with the bloom here at like 5, and the softness like 0.17. So maybe we can add some flare as well. I'm not sure.
The flare is tricky. Like it can work.
It's very tricky. Yeah.
I did use streak on the other one. Streak is another one that's can be a little bit tricky. If you take the threshold down, you can start to see like it kind of as another bloom.
Yeah.
But we get those sort of like stretched highlights. The sort of like, you can see this sort of like star pattern on these things. that's to taste if you want it disco-y or not. For mine, I wanted it kind of disco-y, but
I do. I want a bit of, because if you think of underwater, you definitely think of that light kind of moving in a shiny way. Like whenever you go to the beach and you think of like that, the beach, I see some of that like overblown light. Let's say I'm happy with that. Let's look at the clay really quickly. Right. So we're getting a lot of intensity in this spot here. So let's maybe go light by light again and see what everything is doing. So our spot is crazy cool, I feel. It adds so much like depth into this one area. Let's see our gobo here. I feel like our gobo could be doing a little bit more for us.
Yeah, maybe take the exposure to 1 instead of -1. Let's see what...
Yeah, much better. Night and day.
Yeah.
And then let's bring out our spot. And let's look at the volume contribution. It's great. HRI. Let's remove our spot.
Does the textured light have volume contribution?
Very little. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And maybe let's play with our materials again. Now that we kind of have a sense of what we're doing here. So if we add copper or gold here, it's going to be very shiny. I like what we had.
Yeah, it almost gives it that like bioluminescent look with these like little bits here that are just catching that light on top. That's interesting.
Definitely, because it kind of darkens it up a bit more. I like what we had. Maybe a bit darker. And then I have this bubble here somewhere. I'm just going to enable it, see what it looks like. Right here. So if we... I like to add bubbles and things like that into my scene to get a sense of how light is being refracted sometimes. You can kind of see here.
Okay, is that just like a water texture on that?
Yeah, just basic water texture.
I see. Yeah.
Also have like, I had built this grains earlier around the scene. And I just have a basic emission material in there. We can see what that looks like as well. And if it looks good, we can maybe dial it in. It was like an earlier idea that I had. It's cooking. It's basically a flip simulation with some points, and that those points are being advected by the same velocity that we're using to grow the hairs.
Okay, so that same like sort of smoke sim that came out from left to right? Okay.
You can kind of see it here. It adds a little bit of that luminescent floor. So if we hide... I think it adds a lot actually to the scene. If you just come here, you'll kind of see what it is. And then I have a emissive material here. That's just adding emission. And the emission weight is set to an extremely high number to kind of get like that overblown effect. And that's it. So I think this looks good, personally. What else would you try here? Maybe you're not happy with everything being so blue. Maybe you like to see different styles. But I personally think this blue is an interesting take on the shot. And it adds like a sort of like underwater feel. Maybe trying more subtle colors could be interesting too. So like a variation of pink to blue.
I think, so one thing I want to ask you about. So if I sort of like lean back and I like squint my eyes, I do get a sense like there's this sort of focal point here on the left as this thing is moving across. I think though, it is, we're getting a lot of these, like the thicker tendrils have this sort of orange and white.
Yeah.
That is very contrasty because we're not only contrasting with the light and dark, but it's also a contrasting color. So we've got this sort of blue orange thing. And I wonder if that's, like, do you feel like that is Like I notice it a lot. I'm like kind of pulled kind of all over. And I wonder if
like only these should be like that, but not these outside ones, right?
maybe. I don't know. It's something like right now I'm noticing, and I think it'd be kind of interesting to see it, those toned down. So I'm focused mostly on the bright areas that are growing.
Let's try it really quickly. So I'll build the RS material blender, and we're gonna use the RS point attribute amount. I think all of these materials should have. I'm gonna bring it into my blend. I'll make this my layer color 1, and then you are my base surface. So only the one in the middle will be copper, or the other way around. Let's first make sure that amount is actually working. It's kind of hard to see at the moment. So what we can do is just hide everything. That's so cool. Wow, very cool. Actually, this is definitely a really nice sort of complexy light setup. I dig it a lot.
One thing I'm noticing that maybe our caustic projection light needs to be moved up. We might be, the top of our scene might be out of the view. Noticing now after everything was turned off.
You mean like move it up a bit more, right?
I think maybe it looks like, because we're kind of missing. I wonder if it's just needs to be like kind of moved.
I think you're right. There we go. It's getting more of the perfect.
I think, or maybe it might need to be a little bit. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
it might need to be taller. Scale it up a little bit.
That works for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think we might notice in the animation that like the top never had any of those, or the bottom didn't have any of the caustic pattern going. So we're kind of like clipping it.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, cool. We can edit that in a bit. So what I want to do now is first ensure that I have an attribute to do what it is that I'm trying to do, which is, right there. Those hairs definitely have the amount right there. So amount. So I made a mouse button. I look at all my attributes and I'm looking for amount. Yeah, I see it. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is make it so that we blend, and I'll just steal the blender that I made here. I'll make you the base and just blend. So now this material should only be applied to the parts that are of this color, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that way we only bring focus to the areas that have growth, and everything else just stays pretty much dull and boring, which is what makes it a bit more elegant, in my opinion. So if we do an RS invert right now, you'll kind of see the difference. Now it does the opposite, right? Which is also really cool.
Yeah.
Actually quite cool. I never thought to do the, but yeah. So we've got this. Let's maybe play with the roughness a bit here. Do surely a shikmi, which is, I think sometimes produces a softer calculation of color. Maybe lower the IRR a little. It's kind of like make this a bit different and weird. Let's see. Nice. Bring. That's going into the color diffuse there. Nice. All right. Let's do the same for hair sweep 1. And then you are the base color. Oops. And drag. So now if we visualize the sweep, it's a good time to hit Control Save. So I'm going to save as. I can't believe this whole time I haven't had a single crash. I'm amazing.
Just living on the edge there.
Seriously. So if you notice here, the ones here should, in fact, be this thing. So base color, right? Should be that. Maybe we need to invert it. Sometimes it takes a minute for this thing to cook. It's actually a mixture. Yeah, so we have a mask. So it's going to get the ones in the middle. Great. And let's see. The ones on the outside should be, yeah, so this is the inside. So we do need to invert it. So now the outside is blue. Basically, we want everything in the outside to be sort of like darkish, like a darkish kind of blue, so that you don't really see them. And then the focus goes to the ones in the middle, which are the ones that are coming through this channel, right?
So you're just doing like a blend between, or is it between two different materials?
So basically, the ones that are outside the growth zone are going to be darker than the ones in the growth zone, which will be more like, hey, look at these.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
And then we've just done it too. And then let's see if we can do the same for sweep 2. Yeah. So this is kind of where the problem is, right? So sweep 2.
I wonder, like, because we have such a strong spotlight, like another thing we can do is just lower the overall intensity of this and let the light sort of highlight the ones. So like they might be able to be okay to be like all the same material, but just darker overall, so that that spotlight really, we can like crank it even higher or leave it as is and see. I mean, just different, it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It doesn't really matter.
So you notice now how the ones in the middle are always darker. I mean, brighter, more alive, and everything on the outside is quite dead.
Yeah. But you still see them, though. That's nice, because we still see them there. They're not lost.
There's something wrong with his hair.
Is one still turned off? Oh, there. Or no?
I'm not sure. It's definitely a different look, but let's leave it like that for now. And you can always come back and edit. So you're basically saying to make the HRI or the light a bit less strong?
Oh, no, I was thinking that the material, so right now there's like a stark contrast between the material of the tendrils that are growing really tall and the ones that are staying sort of in the background and low. But we're highlighting the ones that are growing with a very intense spotlight. So I was saying that we could, you could do like the material change for the ones that grow, and it could be like much lighter than the smaller ones, or kind of keep the material just the same, but darken it overall and increase the intensity of the spotlight to call out the like center of interests, but it's not one. I'm not saying like one's better than the other. It's just a different approach.
So, and to your point, I'm trying to move this light here to see what sort of differences it feels like.
And that's the spotlight?
Yeah. It's our most obvious volumetric light.
Yeah.
I think it's quite cool if the light is kind of shining what's coming in, but leaving the stuff behind sort of darker. That could be quite cool.
Yeah. And as this, that's the other thing, is like sort of animating these things. So, this light, the spotlight could move with the motion, and it could also like flicker. It could be, it could be like, the intensity could be changing. But that's all like, I feel like once you get the look dialed in, you can sort of like look at the animation and
exactly. I quite like the bringing the light here.
One thing I'll notice though, I'll say, is that I feel like it looks a little bit flatter because we don't have the angle as harsh. So
Yeah.
it's almost, we might be missing some of the
Let's,
shadows that we had
let's see
before.
what our side view looks like, actually. Well, we would have to move the camera quite a bit.
It's so funny how the volumetrics change so much depending on the camera. That's a big difference.
Huge difference. All right, maybe that was a bad idea. Let's go to our top camera. And yeah.
So the spotlight now is just sort of like in front of the motion, pointing, like, is it from right to left?
Yeah, pretty much.
I see. So it's almost, okay, I see. Yeah. So it's kind of the opposite of our top down lighting. We're going like from the bottom up.
Yeah, I think so. It should be at the same angle as because you notice the shadows are still going this way.
Yeah, I think so. I think that sort of opposite effect, like the light kind of going the opposite way, kind of diminishes some of those shadows. So that's why I think it looks maybe a little bit flatter, because we're sort of crossing the light.
Yeah, let's fix that. We want to actually do it from... Yeah, it's definitely better.
And I wonder if you like raise it up, are we like sort of just skimming across the top of the one? So like if we go down, boy, this is hard to explain. If we put the light like towards the top, like the way it was, like the angle of it, and like rotate it around, keep going, like rotate it, I guess, like counterclockwise.
So like this?
Yeah. Yeah. Keep going. And keep going. Keep going. Okay. And now instead of rotating the light, we're just going to like move it up and then over to the right a little bit. And what I'm thinking about here is just the light sort of skimming across the top of these tall tendrils.
I see.
And maybe, can we just solo that light to see it by itself?
Right here.
Yeah. Wow. So it looks like, yeah, it looks like it's really just like skimming, barely skimming the top. So maybe we lower it down a little bit. Yeah.
There we go. Maybe bring it up a little bit. I've just changed the order of the material because I feel this might be a bit more interesting.
I think right now we've got this sort of like, if I just squint at this and I'm like kind of taking a step back, there's clearly an area that I'm focusing on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like in general, I think like the lighting here is like, that's sort of the concept, I would say. And like, you know, other like lights could be like spotlights, could be added, or like elongating it to like span the whole growth, things like that. So it's not maybe a cone, it's more like a long oval or a long rectangle, so that like the entire growth.
Oh, it's super
is
tricky,
in the light.
Tricky light, but I think this tells a concept right here of what it is that we're trying to go into, which is this sort of like underwater, overlit, but also dark at the same time, which is what makes it so difficult. But yeah, like I guess what I would say is like getting a scene like this just perfect could take as long as 2 to 3 days of just dialing in lights back and forth.
Yeah, for sure. And plus like the materials change, and then the light has to change, and then like colors change, the light change. Yeah, it's all like one of those balancing acts. Like when you change one thing, you can go back and tweak
so
the
one
others.
Thing that I think would help the scene a lot is maybe adding some bump or some surface imperfections to the tendrils, especially the thicker ones, to further add a bit of realism, right? And yeah, but overall, you're getting some really, really nice results here. I love this here, the way that this captures light and it blends it. I like the dramatic zones. And it's definitely, at least to me, very interesting. Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I can't wait to see this finished up and the whole thing rendered as an animation sequence, because that's going to be the motion. That's going to be the most beautiful.
Epic part. Seeing all that swoosh and light, it's amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So yeah, thank you everyone for sticking by. We know it's a long one, and hopefully you just got to have some fun with us. Doing nerdy things.
Yeah, always happy to hop on a nerd chat and talk it out. I think it's great. Yeah. Awesome. Noah, thank you so much for doing this. That was fun. I enjoyed like watching this stuff being done in Houdini. So I'm definitely looking forward to your tutorials coming up on CG shortcuts, and I will definitely keep my eyes peeled for that. You said beginning of June?
I think so, yeah. Around there.
All right.
It should be coming up, like our swirly little friend. So yeah. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me, Zach.
Oh, no, my pleasure, man. Anytime. So I appreciate it. Thanks so much, everybody.